Aloha. This is Martita with Light Diamond Creative. Thank you for listening to podcast season 2. Yeah, we out here with the Awakening audio biography by yours truly, an attempt to capture the awakening journey of one spirit through a biological lens. Yes, my own lens. My name is Martha. I have a biology degree, and here in this series of podcasts, I would like to share with you the awakening journey that I have gone through, and maybe we'll be able to see some trends. Maybe you've experienced things similar to me. Although I do think that each of our journeys is so unique to who we are as a spirit. And it is so beautiful that we can go through this process. There is a little bit of a feeling like people in other cultures have a little more grace and knowing when it comes to somebody beginning to go through a spiritual awakening. It seems like there are other countries outside of the United States that are able to guide their people through this process that I am attempting to describe here on this podcast. In the first episode, we got a little bit of context where I'm coming from. And again, I'm sharing my story. Well, first of all, peeps, I'm going to be sharing this story the entire life. There's some nuggets in here for you, let me tell you. So I'm going to be sharing my particular story. And in the first episode, really what we talked about is what is the awakening experience? What is that? And then we narrowed into what my experience was growing up, my religious and spiritual influences, and growing up in the context of going to school in a place heavily influenced by the Bible Belt and the Baptist interpretation of the Bible, as someone who would become a biologist. So that's in episode 1 of season 2, Awakening Audio Biography. And today we are getting into a little bit about the awakening journey that I experienced in college. There were a few steps of spiritual awakening before that. And what we discussed in episode 1 a little bit was, along those lines of what is the awakening journey? And we described it as the process of beginning to question the central dogma of religion that we grow up in. Beginning to question this being an aspect of awakening, having a point of autonomy to question what we are being given when it comes to information, religion, spirituality, and even science. This is definitely a space to begin talking about, that space where science and religion or science and spirituality overlap. That is where I am dancing, baby. So moving on into the college experience. When I went to college, I went to a private liberal arts in South Carolina. And this college specifically actually used to have a mascot that was affiliated with Christianity. They used to be the Christian Knights. And by the time I had gotten into the school, they had shifted from being the Christian Knights to being the paladin, the knight on a white horse. So I find that kind of interesting, just reflecting now that, we're talking about the awakening process. We're talking about religion and spirituality and the movement away from a central programming, a central dogma. And here we are, talking about college, this one that I went to, being Christian affiliated and then moving towards something else. We could even say evolving towards something else. Oh, that is crazy right there. So I've been a student athlete every time I've been in school. And in this case, I was recruited to play basketball. I ended up playing basketball for 1 year, and then I moved on to I quit. And, more information about that story another time. But I quit and then walked on to the varsity volleyball team and ended up being with them for 4 years. It was pretty great. And so I was also taking classes the first couple of years of college that were more general. A liberal arts curriculum seems to be really about giving someone kind of a platter, so to speak, of all sorts of different subjects, and then someone choosing which food on the platter is the best that they like, aka which degree is it that I would really like to go into after experiencing this entire platter of potentials. So I had some general courses before choosing my degree, and those courses that I'd like to bring up today include human evolution, dimensions of religion, global water issues, and physics and the natural universe. So these are some of the initial courses that I took in my first 2 years of college. Let's tap into global water issues first, because this is the first one that I took in my first semester or second, somewhere around there. And global water issues, now talk about awakening. So one of the awakening steps, I believe, is becoming aware of our environment and the status it is in, accepting responsibility for our role in how the environment manifests itself around us, positive or negative. And I believe that part of the awakening journey is to come in alignment with our ideas and our perceptions and do something about it. So global water issues, when I took that class, it illuminated the issues that we are having on a global scale when it comes to water. The water is a reason, or perceived lack of water is a reason for war. Many wars have been started over resources, including water, including food, and including religion. So that class, when it comes to a biology standpoint, was a great introduction to current issues environmentally and coming into an awareness of water quality and why that matters, and also conserving water quantity, as well as seeing what the demonstrated effects are of things like dams on an ecosystem and what those changes are that take place when a dam is built to create a reservoir of this resource. So these were a lot of our explorations, and I remember part of it being documenting or becoming aware of how much water we consume, and that is an awakening process. So much of the awakening process is learning truth, learning facts, becoming aware on a much different level what is going on in the environment as well as what is going on internally. So that class really had an impact on me. And then I started to get into some other classes, dimensions of religion. This class is where we did read many parts of the Bible. It was the most I'd ever read the Bible because I was so turned off as a kid that I really did not tap into the Bible at all. I was just kind of fed up with it early on because of the approach that the Baptists had towards people who are homosexual. I was turned off really early. So this course, Dimensions of Religion, was the first one I had ever taken time to read through the Bible. Of course, it was required and there were assignments on it. This is the class where I learned that different sections of the Bible are written by different people and during different times. And I also learned the influence of politics on the manuscript during different points and at different places. So this was something that really helped to clarify to me what I had a feeling about already, which was that the Bible is not always meant to be taken literally, and certainly parts of the Bible have been manipulated and shifted in order to teach people things that would disempower them and empower others so that they can manipulate the disempowered people further. We can see this in the Vatican. We can see this in Catholicism. So there is no denying that that has happened over time. And I really appreciated a non-religious approach to the Bible as a witness who could have a further back perspective and see what's going on, seeing that many people wrote it, seeing that it was altered over time, seeing these different perspectives. That was really cool to me. And around the same time, I was taking this course, Human Evolution. Oh my gosh, and just the word evolution will trigger some people. That is how thick the dogma programming is. It's like it can't even listen to it, can't even be open to it. Well, I hope that you'll listen for a moment, and many of you listening have already more so aligned with the concept of evolution, although maybe you would not be able to describe its process to someone else. So this is what I'm about to tell you. Evolution is the change in species over time at the community or population level. The change in these populations over time, depending on the environmental circumstances, the expression of genetics becoming different over time because of triggers through the environment to the individual, which we now are talking about the broad concept of epigenetics, an external factor, an environmental factor, something outside the body coming into an individual or population or community level, and this changing the dynamics of life within a given area of land, for example. So evolution can be demonstrated more easily by animals and plants that have a shorter life cycle than humans. Humans, we're one of the animals on Earth that lives the longest, and so it can be a little more difficult to see how we change over time than it is to see something change over time that has a short life cycle, like a fly or maybe some minnows or maybe plants, fungus. Those demonstrate change over time more easily from our perspective. So let's take the example of minnows, and I'm talking just any general kind of minnow. It doesn't have to be a specific species. In classic biology, one would learn that evolution is not demonstrated on an individual level, and that evolution is at smallest demonstrated on a population level, which is a group of individuals. This is a classic perspective. So, minnows. Let's say that we have two groups of minnows, and let's say that we have two giant puddles that are present, which the minnows live in. You with me so far? So let's say that the life cycle of this minnow is, I'm not sure what the life cycle is. I don't remember at this point, but let's say that the life cycle of a minnow is half a year. That's just a guess, okay? Feel free to look it up and put it down in the comments. So let's say for this thought exploration of evolution that the life cycle of a minnow is 6 months, and that the minnows are separated into two groups, and they are living within a giant puddle. And that the puddle stays there forever. Okay. And let's say that there is a predator who sees yellow better than any other color. A predator in the community, in the area of the minnows, that sees yellow better than any other. For some reason, that predator has an adaptation that really cues it in to seeing yellow. Okay, and then we look at these two groups of minnows that are the same in the first generation. Okay, one puddle is the control group, let's say, and all of those minnows have yellow in them. And then we have puddle 2 with the experimental group, and they all have yellow in them too in the first generation. And let's say in the second generation of these minnows, in puddle 2, the experimental group, there is a mutation that causes some of the individual minnows to have a difference in color expression, yielding minnows who do not have a yellow stripe on them. And over here in the control group, there are no mutations. All of offspring generation 2 have the yellow stripe. Let's bring the predator in. The predator can see all of these yellow stripes, and the predator spots the yellow striped minnows easily because of the minnow's genetic expression. So the predator goes out with its family and it's hunting these yellow striped minnows. So we see that a lot of the yellow striped minnows in puddle A control group are eaten up, and a lot of the ones from generation 1 in puddle 2 experimental group are eaten up. And the ones who have had a genetic mutation or variation expressing non-yellow color are still alive and in the puddle because they don't have the yellow stripe and the predator did not see them as easily, and so they live. Generation 3. It's been 12 months. We're at the end of the third 6 months, and generation 3 is here. Generation 3 is the collective genetics from the survivors in experimental group puddle 2. Are you following me? Generation 3's genetics are, their offspring is from the ones who survived, and the ones who survived are the ones that had the varying genetic expression to not create the yellow stripe. And so we find in generation 3 that more and more of these do not have a yellow stripe. Meanwhile, in the control group, all of them have the yellow stripe because the mutation or differing genetic expression did not happen in that control group. And so the predator comes around again and it is able to see all these yellow stripes, more of them in control group than in experimental group. The predator comes by and it eats a bunch of the ones up that are in puddle 1 and misses a lot of the ones that are in puddle 2 because they're not so obvious and maybe a little more camouflaged. And this goes on, and eventually the entire puddle 1 might be eaten up. Meanwhile, puddle number 2 has this other group that have successfully passed on the genetics that would cause a minnow to express a more neutral color. And so then let's say we're down the road and it's generation 10 of these minnows. Generation 10 times 6 months down the road. And puddle 2 has only minnows that have more of a camouflage. And group 1, control group, is just totally depleted because they never experienced the genetic expression of something that would hide them from a predator. This is where we really come into the evolution of creatures over time within the context of predator-prey relationships. This is a demonstration of evolution. Now, if we move that to the human focus, our lives are not 6 months long, and we don't create a stripe of yellow that would attract a predatory bird to us, but we can still kind of shift the perspective, bringing the same concepts. So humans over time, like all other species on Earth, have experienced environmental circumstances that have made it more beneficial to be one way or another. And the groups, the populations of individuals that demonstrate an adaptation, making it easier to survive for whatever reason, those are the genetics that would be passed towards the offspring, and the generations would continue with that genetic information. And at any point when a circumstance from the environment comes in that constrains a population due to adversity in one way or another, the population will respond by the presence of genetics within the next generation of offspring. We can also see evolution in the presence of a species of moth that existed in Europe throughout the Industrial Revolution. Again, a short life cycle, so it's easier to witness. The Industrial Revolution is an example of an environmental factor for this moth species. The Industrial Revolution in Europe caused soot from coal mines to begin covering the trees. And so the moths, which initially were white in color, were able to blend in with the trees until the trees became covered in soot and turned darker. And then a genetic expression of a gray moth became apparent within the species. And the gray moth was able to blend more in with the trees than the white moths, making the white moths more prone to predation because they were more easily seen, and the gray moths able to blend in with the soot on the trees from the charcoal plants. And so what is passed on to the next generation is actually the genetics of a gray moth, and eventually this becoming more and more present within the population because it's more advantageous in the context of an industrial revolution and soot on the trees. It's more advantageous for a moth to be gray so that it blends in and is not eaten up by the bird. Evolution is a fact. There's no denying it. The only reason that we would deny it is because we were taught at some point that the world is 6,000 years old. And that 6,000 years is not enough time. It is not enough time for all of this to happen. It is not enough time for humans to be where we are at. It's not enough time for any species to have come so far as they have at this point. The earth, what is it? It's like 4 billion years old. I'd have to double check that. But, when we talk about the science aspect of things and we talk about religion, and if we are not taking the Bible literally and not literally interpreting it when the Bible says that God made earth in 7 days. Well, I heard a joke the other day from a pastor. I'm not going to tell the whole joke, but basically he was talking about someone approaching God and asking one question about time or something. Is like, what is $1 million to you nothing because you've been in existence for forever? Is one human's lifetime nothing to you, God, because you've existed forever? And so even if we're seeing, okay, let's say God made the world in 7 days, and then let's look at the other perspective of evolution and the earth being 4 billion years old or something like that. I could be wrong. Please correct me. God, the universe, spirit has been around so long that maybe 7 days is a metaphor for putting grand time of 4 billion years into a 7-day period so that we can possibly fathom time and earth on that scale. What if God making the earth in 7 days is a story foretelling evolution? What if God is the species responding to environmental shifts, environmental circumstances over time, and God made both the environment and the individual and the free will that goes along with being an individual, and the free will being able to affect the decision that one individual makes that may be passed to an entire collective for their survival. Anyways, we got on a tangent with human evolution, but I think you hear what I'm saying. Let's move on to this next class, and then we're going to cut this episode. So when I was a student athlete in college, going through these courses, the question for me still remains at this point. How can it be both? How can it be religion and science? How can it be science and God? Because I kept getting the program. Everyone thinks it's different, but that doesn't feel right to me. So then I got in this class, physics and the natural universe. Oh my gosh, here we are with the physics classes. Physics classes will blow one's mind and really bring us into a state of questioning what we believe and why, because the information going into physics is so profound. I mean, it really wasn't that long ago that physics has been really put words to, and only I think in the last 100 or so years have we even gotten close to discovering quantum physics and the movement of energy through the ether on a subatomic level. We're only really tapping into that. So physics and this question of how does it all go together? I remember getting out of class one day and I could not stop thinking about it. Which is right? Is it science? Is it religion? Is it science or is it spirit? How can they possibly go together? And I remember being in my bed, and I had workouts the next day. I had to be up at probably 4:30 a.m. to get to conditioning or strength training or whatever it was. I was up before the ass crack of dawn most days. And I couldn't fall asleep. I'm in my bed. I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot stop thinking about this battle of science versus religion, science versus spirituality. How does it work? Because I so felt resonance with the information I learned in the physics class. And I so did not feel resonance with the dogma of the Baptist culture around me. What am I going to do with this? What is right? What is true? This was a huge night in my spiritual awakening. I'm rolling in bed. I'm tossing and turning. Oh my gosh, how can this be true and that be true? And then finally, I realize, I come to peace with the idea that science and religion, science and spirituality, science and God, science and the universe are describing the same thing with different words, the same or similar messages conveyed through two perspectives. And finally, I could fall asleep. That's episode 2, people. Podcast season 2, The Awakening audio biography by yours truly. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Feel free to share the video, give it a thumbs up. You can also donate to Light Diamond Creative on CashApp, Venmo. Find Light Diamond Creative on Instagram and YouTube. I appreciate you. Thanks for being here. Hope you have a good one. Peace.